Well, but here we are to talk
Yes,
about cheese. So, Beth, would you like to start by introducing yourself?
I am Beth Cato. I am not a cheese professional. I hold no certification from the ACS or any other organization. I am not a cheesemonger. I am not pretending to be. What I am is an obsessed cheese lover. I am a turophile to the extreme. I have a Word document where I've been tracking my cheese consumption since 2015. That is now 117,000 words. A lot of that is cheese descriptions from companies and from packaging, all that. That's not all my notes, but I take my cheese very seriously. I am always seeking out new cheeses. To me, it is an adventure. If I am on vacation, I am seeking out the cheese.
I love that. I am also, my name is Madame Askew. If you don't know me, I'm a cheeky strumpet with many opinions about many things and also a costumer, tea aficionado, and I love cheese. I am also not a cheese professional. I have no accreditation behind my name. No one pays me to be a cheese professional. No, I pay them
But
to
if
give
anyone
me
wants to
cheese.
step up and do so,
Yes, we'll take the money. So I don't know, Beth, you and I discovered a shared passion for cheese years ago now, actually.
yes, yes.
And in talking to a few other steampunks, I have discovered that there's a thread that runs through our community, a love of tea, a love of cheese. And
Yes.
then there are people who also love absinthe and sometimes love cheese and tea as well. So, but
And whiskey, yes,
oh
many
yes,
quality things, yes.
yes. No, whiskey and cheese is a good pairing right there too. The right cheese with the right whiskey, of course.
Of course.
But cheese, what I consider to be a wonderful steampunk food that does not get enough love in fandom.
Yes.
So, and I know I brought some cheese to enjoy today. I won't eat it in front of all of you. That would be rude.
Have Wensleydale or Stilton there with
I
cranberry?
have I have a Wensleydale with cranberries, and
Okay.
then I have a sort of new to me Wensleydale that is with a lemon and honey
Ah,
Wensleydale,
is
and that
that the one that Costco? I know. Is it
yes,
Singleton and Company?
yes, it is.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's like Sicilian lemon and honey. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly it. And it's lovely.
Oh,
It's
you bet.
I'm so it's I was like putting this together and I thought, should I make notes? Should I write down the names? And I thought, no, I bet Beth will know what they are without me writing down the names. So here I also have some a cave aged Gruyere, which is oh, so good. It's delightfully stinky, but not too stinky. I'm not really a big blue cheese eater. It's only a little bit of blue cheese.
Yeah.
And then I have what I consider my comfort cheese. This is the cheese that I go to when times are hard. Dubliner.
Always, that is an all-time favorite for me. I love Dubliner and bless Costco for carrying nice big blocks of it that make it affordable.
Yes, I feel like cheese is the main reason I have a Costco membership.
It validates it. It really does, yes.
Yeah, that's usually the only thing I'm getting there is cheese and maybe wine.
Well, and they do, depending on the store, they do carry good whiskeys as well.
Oh yes, yes they do. But I'm usually abstaining because I want to buy more cheese, and the whiskey will
You must
really
have
eat
balance.
up
Yes.
So whiskey purchases are every 6 months or something. Once.
I can show off my cheese. Did you describe all of your cheeses on your plate? I don't wish to cut you off.
Oh no, I did. I named them all. They are delightful. So good.
Well, I'm going to try and show off my cheese with a cat on my lap. So we will see how this goes.
Fingers crossed.
Because he may get interested in this stuff. Okay, well, I have a couple of Costco finds here as well. I wanted to share a variety of things from my cheese drawer. This is a like package to probably your.
Ooh, yes.
This is double Gloucester from Singleton and Company. I squealed in Costco when I saw that they were carrying this because this is so rare to find in America, especially in Arizona.
Yeah.
And to read the description of this, because I gathered all the notes. Double Gloucester cheese, with its deep orange hue and nutty taste, is perhaps most famous due to its centuries-old event called cheese rolling. On the last weekend in May, every year, men and women chase a wheel of Double Gloucester down Cooper's Hill in Gloucestershire, England. When we say race, we mean scramble, roll, fall, and bounce down the hill in pursuit of our large orange friend. This spectacular event has been happening almost every year for at least 200 years, and past participants have even included Edward the Explorer. The prize, a wheel of Double Gloucester as big as the one that they launched down the hill. Fortunately, here at the castle, we can help you enjoy the cheese without the cheese, and it's suitable for vegetarians too. So it is a storied and even a Victorian,
Yes.
era cheese to feature.
And it's a lovely cheese. It's sort of hearty cheese.
It's akin to Chapman. No, do not stick your nose in there. Thank you. And then going to one of my favorites. This was what was your gateway cheese to the world of fine cheese?
Honestly, I lived in Rome. And so I think actually my gateway cheese was Italian cheeses, primarily Parmigiano, right? Like
a nicely well-aged one, getting the good stuff.
Yes. Once you've gotten good Italian cheese, it's really hard to go back. So
I was raised on the green canisters myself, so it wasn't until really recent years that I discovered that's not really Parmesan.
It's not, and once you have the real deal, you can really tell the difference. And I try not to be that person, but I always have like a wedge of Parmesan in the cupboard,
and it will keep.
Yes.
Well, this was my gateway cheese to the world of fine cheese. There's a site called woot.com, and they used to feature cheese quite often. This past year, they've actually stopped carrying cheese.
Oh.
But they were featuring a California cheese company called Vella that does a dry jack, which is one. There are very few American original cheeses. You have Monterey Jack, you have Colby, you have some like that. Everything else in America tends to have some kind of European influence. But this is one made by, their dry jack is now made by two California companies. You have Vella, and then you have Rumiano, which is in Northern California. And this is a dry jack. And if you look up close, you can see the crystallization in that cheese. And the rind is completely edible. It is very hard. This would be a case where you would actually use a parm knife, and I will be displaying knives in a little bit.
Yes.
But this one is interesting because it is hand rubbed with a coating of black pepper and cocoa powder.
Ooh.
And the wonderful thing about this one is because it is so dry and aged, it can even keep very well without refrigeration for a long time. And at some point we were going to probably talk about pasteurization, and I also wanted to talk into traveling with cheese to be able to take home souvenirs. So we'll go into that.
Yes.
And
just, cheese as a traveling food in general. So
absolutely.
Good. That dry jack, gorgeous.
It is. And sometimes around Phoenix, AJ's Fine Foods will carry those sometimes. And this is a 6-year cheddar.
Ooh. Oh, beautiful.
I'm looking forward to. This is Heber Valley out of Utah. And they do a number of other flavored cheeses, and sometimes Sprout stores will carry them, at least in Arizona, maybe other states as well.
I'll have to keep my eye out at the local Sprouts. I now that I sent the butler to live with his family during the pandemic, I have to do all my own shopping.
As one does, yes.
Yeah. So.
And then.
Please go ahead. I was just going to be silly.
You're so, please be silly. Please.
Please. Well, the thing is, Mick McTavish had a penchant for blue cheese, so he would always bring home a lot of blue, and then he'd eat it. So the nice thing about shopping for myself at the market is that I do get a great deal more aged cheddar, which is passion. I love it so much.
And it's so hard to find. I know, at least around here.
Yes.
Phoenix, we don't really have local cheesemakers. It's very few and far between. So yesterday at Costco, and this was for, if you're in the Phoenix area, the 303 Costco that has really, upper crust, it only opened a year ago. They had a 4-pack of Marin French Cheese Company out of California. It is the oldest cheese company in the United States. 1865 was when they made a 4-pack of 4-ounce soft rain cheeses. Like $11.
Ooh,
This one I grabbed a feature because I am not a big fan of blue cheese as well, and I'm also typically not a fan of truffle cheeses.
Yeah,
I like truffle in other foods, but in cheeses it tends to be missed for me.
Yeah,
I'm very excited about this 4-pack because their Trader Joe's will sometimes carry their petite breakfast brie, which is just this cute little round like this.
yes.
But I was very excited that Costco, and I saw on my Facebook when I featured a picture of this, apparently other Costco's around are also carrying this 4-pack of Marin French cheeses. So be on the lookout at your local Costco's for that.
Honestly, Costco should be sponsoring this panel. The amount we've been like, go buy your cheese at Costco. My other favorite place for cheese finds is actually Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a little bit easier entree there. You don't need a membership. Sometimes I have some real gems, but it's hit or miss. It varies because they change things up.
And seasonally, and Aldi has opened nearby in the past year for me, and I'm so glad they're building one 2 miles away from me, and I'm going to be there all the time. But Aldi, it's from a German chain, and they actually bring over a lot of British cheeses in particular, and they are very nicely priced. And I've been getting a lot of cheeses from Aldi and trying to try everything that they have because it's a great price for it.
Excellent.
Hello, Finn.
Oh, hello, kitten.
Yes.
So, did you have more to preview? I didn't mean to cut you.
Those were the 4 there, but we have a lot of other stuff to talk about. We have knives. I have from people. We have other things to discuss. So
yes. Well, so would you like to get into the knives? I'm excited about them. We don't want to miss the knives by going off on another tangent.
And I'll show off my shirt. Put cheese in me. The shirt I can't wear out in public. This is bought from the cheese influencer Cheese Sex Death.
Oh my goodness!
A wonderful cheese influencer, and her book. She has a book coming out in October too. So
oh my gosh, I should pre-order it.
Yes.
Because we talked about why pre-orders are important. Absolutely. And you introduced me to her account on Instagram. It's fantastic. I love
church. Yes, and takes it very seriously. And yeah, she does amazing stuff.
So I know you said you're not a cheese professional, but I would describe you as a high priestess of cheese.
Thank you.
So, in fact, I have described you that way to people. So
I am an evangelist for cheese. I think it would be fair to say yes.
Yes.
I will knock on your door and say, have you heard the good word about cheeses? Yes. Yeah. That would definitely be me. Because when I go obsessive on stuff, I go obsessive. I literally have a pile of books. In case anyone had questions, I have reference books here I can pull out and whip out and look up stuff. So if I don't know it, I can look it up. But I do have blades. Who wants to know about cheese knives?
Me.
Okay. Start with this beauty.
Oh, gorgeous.
This is a cheese plane. You can see it has a blade there. This is only for use with certain kinds of cheese. I would say good with most cheddars, unless it has an especially hard rind, but it gives you beautiful thin slices of cheese. If you're wanting to layer cheese for a lasagna, or for even doing a grilled cheese and you're wanting multiple layers of different kinds of cheese, this is a good way to get nice thin cheese.
Oh no, you just opened up the world of grilled cheese for me in a whole new way.
Oh yes.
And I thank you for it, because that sounds glorious.
Well, and if you want to really make a unique grilled cheese, use a waffle iron.
Oh, I have one.
And you can even do and a waffle iron can take really thick, crusty bread, like a good French bread. That sucker will compress it. It will make the best grilled cheese you've ever had. And it's done in, like the 4 minutes it takes to crisp up.
Oh, I guess I know what brunch is tomorrow.
Right now.
Oh, I have a waffle iron and I never want to make waffles, but I love a grilled cheese. So thank you.
Try it and let me know what you think. And you can always adjust depending on the waffle maker, you can adjust the toastiness of it so you can find the right level. But,
yeah, mine has some adjustability.
There you go. Most of them do, yeah.
It's like a cheesy panini.
It is in a way, yes. But those suckers can take some really thick bread and it'll smush it.
Oh, perfect. All right.
So who knows what kind of cheese this is for?
The kind I'm going to eat.
So, there you go.
Yeah.
This would be good with like one of those little round, this is for soft rind, and like it's a long blade. So like say you have a huge brie or camembert, this would be what you would use for it, because one of the issues with those cheeses is because if it is a very ripe cheese, it can be very soft and squishy. And if you're using like a standard knife blade, it'll be gooey and it won't really cut through. This is thin enough that it'll cut through, but it's not going to goop up the blade terribly.
Right. It's a bit like using a wire with cake.
Yes.
So just very sharp, very thin to get through those soft layers.
Yes, exactly. This is my standard workhorse knife. I mean, this is, most kinds of cheese. This would be, the good for your cheddar. And I love this one. This one is actually from Murray's online because it has the little stabby at the end. So
I love the stabby.
To stab a little bit too. So always good to. And speaking of stabby, I love this little thing.
I mean, it's so charming.
It's adorable.
It's the best. Like if you were going to do a cheese priestess steampunk cosplay, you would need a bandolier with a spot just for that one cheese knife.
Well, I love this because it's like something you would stick in the top of a boot, to be really dangerous. Oh yes, I could be an assassin with a knife, but oh no, this is a parm knife. It's not,
You're not going to hurt anyone except the parmesan. Of course.
This is for chunking. This, because it is a parm knife, that is the style of knife. It's when you have a very, very hard, dense cheese. And if you try and use like a standard knife like this, it is so hard, you may very well cut your fingers trying to get through. Whereas this, you kind of pry and dig and you chunk it. And this is for chunking. So it's really good for a mimolette as well.
Oh, I like that.
The big orange cannon, it looks like a big cantaloupe.
So
has that wonderful rind that has been eaten away by cheese mites to give it that lovely texture. But it's very hard inside in the paste. And this is what you would use to chunk it up. So, which is great for salads.
Or just, tiny little nibbles.
Yeah. And great for a cheese plate, like what you have there. Yeah. Yes. If you had a very hard cheese, this is the knife you would want. You would want a parm knife. And you can get these on Amazon. I mean, this one was from Murray's as well, but you can find them all over the place. So that's the standard array of cheese knives. Of course, there are more kinds than this. And like you said, like you have a wire for doing cake, there are also wire contraptions for doing cheese. I have a marble one that I don't use too often. And if you're like in an actual, if you're a cheesemonger, you can look at videos online of them cutting things like a Parmesan or that, using this incredibly huge wire system that they use to cut through the huge wheels. It's amazing.
It's like a cheese guillotine.
It really is, yes. Yeah.
They're wonderful to see, but also a little bit terrifying. People think, oh, cheesemongers, peaceful people. But then you see the tools. Don't cross your cheesemonger.
And when you think about the intimidation of some of those big wheels of imported cheese, you're talking those things can be $1,000 if it's I mean, that's not something you want to drop on the floor by accident.
No.
So, I mean, you're not only using tools that you could, lose fingers using, but you're also working with very expensive cheese, and it would be a tragedy if that were to be ruined in the process.
Yeah, no. I mean, like a wheel of cheese, really nice cheese, is massive investment.
Oh, yes.
So when I see those sorts of weird videos that go through the ether webs where they're like, oh, we've got a wheel of cheese and we're just going to carve it out and melt it, I think the whole wheel, that seems very wasteful to me.
You would need a lot of people to really go into that. I mean, like, you see, like, fancy Italian restaurants, they actually do a thing where they take a big wheel of a cheese like Parmesan, and they actually will take the pasta and toss it in like an increasingly eroded bowl within the cheese, and that's how they cover the noodles with cheese. So and then they move it, but that's for a restaurant. I mean, that's
not for home use.
Not for home use, not unless you're very dedicated and have a very large, it's like post-apocalypse and you had all of humanity living in a basement. That's when you'd
I mean, you know, if I'm stuck in an apocalypse, first of all, I want to be in your basement. And we should definitely pool our resources to have a few wheels of cheese.
There we go, yes.
It's the only way to get through the apocalypse.
When we know the apocalypse is coming, we'll get the toilet paper and the wheels of cheese, right?
Yes.
Because now we know what's in demand.
That's right. Cheese, bread, toilet paper. And you know how to bake, and I can manage baking when I have to.
So we can work together. We'll work out a
manage.
Yeah.
So for some reason, talking about the wheels of cheese and cheese investment makes me think of the death cheese. And I know that you saw the death cheese because I remember everyone tagging you in that article, yes. Possibly even myself. But what an investment. That is fascinating to me, that the cheese is so special a treasure that it lasts your lifetime.
Yeah, that was I forget. It was one of those obscure historical sites. And yeah, it's an alpine village where they have cheese that is quite ancient. And it's literally like, you're born, here's a wheel of cheese dedicated to you, and we will store it in this basement forevermore. And it has, intricately carved dedication to these people who have been dead for a very long time. And they're the cheese.
They're beautiful. Yep. And there's, I think it was an Alta Obscura or an Atlas Obscura article, honestly. And I recall that there was a gentleman in this Alpine village who's like preserving the death cheeses of people who had no families left to enjoy those cheeses. And so he just has them stored. Preserved.
And they have this patina after all this time because they've gotten so desiccated in their cheese cellar. Yeah,
they're beautiful. Probably too hard even for the Parmesan knife.
So, you'd need like an industrial drill to get through those things, I would think. But right now it's almost more like a tombstone, kind of memorial than it is a food product.
No, I can't imagine trying to even eat those.
No.
So, but cheese and transport cheese as a food.
Yes, we were going to discuss history of cheese and get into all this. Yes.
I took us down the death cheese tangent with apologies. But
we never apologize for death cheese.
I just love the death cheese. But, you and I have talked about this briefly, and, it's a fascination of mine as a steampunk and time traveler, but also as anthropology person, is just that there is a technology around preparing and preserving cheese that allowed people to have food that would last outside of refrigeration and that travel with them. And I love that. And I feel like it is sort of in line with some of the things we play around with in steampunk. Just you have to find technology that works for long travel. You have to find things that allow you to keep yourself fed. And cheese is wonderful that way. I mean, maybe not necessarily brie, but cheddar. Some of these hard cheeses we're talking about that will last outside of refrigeration.
And I think right now we are rightly concerned with sanitation, but to a degree where we've lost the historical context, because we think it's like in America how we are very keen, eggs must be refrigerated. Yes. You go to like Australia or other countries, they don't even sell them refrigerated. and it's not a big deal. And it's part of it's a processing issue. But yeah, cheese has traveled the world. And when you read into cheese history, and there, if anyone is like me and really wants to geek out about cheese history, I highly recommend this book. And I know, I'm sorry, it's showing mirror around.
No, it shows the right way.
By Paul S. Kinsett. And this is a treasure. And if you read other books on cheese, they all cite this book in turn, because it is kind of the source on the subject. And it's fascinating. I mean, I have some notes here. I mean, you go back to the book of Genesis. Abraham is visited by angels, and they are served tender calf and cheese curds. I mean, you're going back that far. When you're talking about preservation, they think a lot of the very early cheeses were things like cheese curds and very fresh cheese, because early on, lactose intolerance was still a thing. A lot of people, the human body had to learn to process cheese, and also coagulants had to be introduced to harden cheese for preservation. And people theorized that maybe it was a point where like a calf's stomach was being used as a transport for milk, and the natural rennet in the stomach coagulated the cheese, and suddenly, hey, this is a hard cheese, this is edible. And they think that maybe how hard cheese developed was because a stomach was being used as a storage device.
Well, and humans have used animal stomachs for all sorts of things.
And it's really very recently that we stopped using every part of the animal thoroughly. And yeah, I mean, your hooves you boiled hooves, and that's how you got glue, and that's how you made gelatin, was you boiled down the hooves, and that was your natural gelatin. Things like that. But then like in Hittite cuneiform records, they had various modifiers for cheese: small cheese, large cheese, crumble cheese, scour cheese, and aged soldier cheese. And that's what, when you're talking about preservation, that's what they suspect is the first recorded instance of hard cheese. Oh, wow. Because who would need cheese to pack in a bag for a long day of walking? Soldiers.
Yes.
So yeah, so actually that's the first recorded instant, is going back to Hittite.
Oh, well, you know what? I love the Hittites for many, many reasons, and also cuneiform, the personal passion for me. But because I study linguistics, and my life outside of time travel and tea is also languages and tea, and this, that, and the other, and languages. If I can appel language to something, I will. But I love that Hittites and that culture is sort of the source for so many things that we take for granted as modern people. So, and there's cheese with them as well.
Well, and then the Rome, in Greece, it was more soft cheeses, especially in the early era. I mean, they think it was a lot of things, feta-like things. But then you get into Rome, and it's amazing. A lot of what we think of now as Alpine cheeses were in existence in the Roman Empire. I mean, they were actually importing those cheeses from what is now France, from Gaul, into Italy. And there are these recorded instances where they're talking about all of these cheeses, and it's early French Alpine cheeses that were very large rounds. I mean, you're talking 80, 100 pounds probably. And because they were drier, that's what makes a cheese last. You have to dry out the cheese. Yeah. And then they can travel.
And so I know in more modern times we have presses and things to help shape the rounds. And
they had versions of presses back then. I mean, you get back to the Roman era, and you have Cato the Elder, oddly enough, actually wrote quite a bit of treatises on agriculture and cheese making. And he loved pork, wrote a lot about, because the Celts were big on introducing pork and making that big in the Roman Empire, as well as they were coincided there. So yeah, and one funny thing, like the people who searched the River Thames in England and dredge, I forget, mudrakers, I can't remember the exact term. Maybe someone in the chat will be able to post it for me.
I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember the term either.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm glad I'm not alone in that. But they've actually recovered like cheese strainers and even old cheese graters from the Roman era out of the Thames in the modern era.
Wow.
And they're recognizable. Yeah.
That's delightful. I mean,
Yeah.
there's something so elegant and straightforward about a cheese grater.
And it's
I,
ancient. I mean, that's the cool thing. I
I
mean,
love that.
you have old, these old, Roman illustrations, and it's a recognizable cheese grater, and they're grating the cheese. It's so cool.
But I mean, leave it to the Romans to understand that in their quest for colonizing half the globe, they were going to need cheese to keep their soldiers and themselves going. And it was delicious. They needed it at home too. Like,
Yeah.
as far as travel rations go, cheese is probably one of my favorite things to
Yes,
travel with. I
absolutely.
think it's much better. I mean, hardtack is a low bar, but cheese, it has everything I need except for roughage and, some vitamins that I should
Depending on
get.
the cheese, it can include the roughage too. If you get something like Alp Blossom or something like that, that has a nice floral or an herb
Oh, yes.
rind, you can get some roughage in there too.
I cannot remember the cheese now, but I think you commented on it. We had a cheese recently that was full of just infused with little, herbs and flowers.
Mhm.
It had just the most wonderful grassy quality to it. I liked it,
Yeah.
but it's the sort of thing where that would be a bit of an acquired taste, like maybe not your first preference as a cheese, because the herbs were very forward in the
Well,
flavor
and it
profile.
depends on who's making it and what the terroir is. There's an imported one from Austria, I believe, that is called Alp Blossom, that has its alpine flowers that cover it, and they're recognizable blooms. If it's an American one, it could be one called Juliana, that I believe the company that makes that is out of Iowa. And again, but because it's out of local flowers and herbs, you get a very different mix there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we sort of brushed on tea and whiskey and things, but something they all share is the terroir that you're
Yes.
talking about.
Mhm.
The land really influences everything about the end results.
Yes.
And I think personally that's something that I must gravitate to because I do love whiskey and I do love tea and I'm pretty keen on wine and you will never take my cheese from me. Like, I don't care what's happening in the world. I will have cheese. But it's really about those local flavors. I don't really want, the Velveeta or the cheese foods.
There's a time and place for that. There's a time and place for it. And depending on your budget, I'm never going to shame anyone.
No.
Best to make do with that, because goodness knows I grew up on all that stuff. And
Well,
that's what we could afford.
Velveeta melts very nicely.
There are times when that is the best thing and it's the affordable thing. Absolutely.
But I don't necessarily, well, I shouldn't lie. There are moments when I crave the little spray cheese on a cracker. There's something very satisfying. But what I tend to really crave are these cheeses that have a distinctive flavor to them.
Yes.
And that's coming from the processing, where they're from, how they're made, or the
Absolutely.
sort of alchemy of those things.
Yes.
I mean, cheese really is sort of alchemy, edible alchemy.
It is. Yes. And it was throughout the ancient and medieval era. I mean, it was something because they didn't have the knowledge of bacteria and mold like we do. They didn't have microscopes. There was definitely something magical and mystical about it. And yeah, I mean, you had there were early Christian sects that actually included cheese in communion because it was, considered this, this mystical thing. There were medieval documents, and there was, oh gosh, I forget the name, a very famous nun or abbess who wrote a big treatise that actually was very strongly, cheese has had very sexual connotations throughout history. And she was actually going heavily into that cheese was very much like the child producing process, because you have essentially seed being introduced to the milk and it coagulates like a baby in the womb, and then you get this product months later, and it's this big vast thing. So it's very mystical religious tones were built into cheese. But through the medieval era, cheese was largely, especially in France and England, was done by monasteries and churches. They are the ones who preserved a lot of the ancient world technology. And because they often also had beer and wine on their properties as well, that's when you get your wash drying cheeses, and going through France and Germany and all that, because they were using what they had, and they're the ones that preserve that knowledge.
That's lovely. I think there's this wonderful convergence of preserving ideas and technology that happens that sometimes I know I forget about, and I think gets lost a bit in the conversation, sort of generic conversation. But this is beautiful reminder that even while those places might have been involved in squelching some things, they were also preserving some really important cultural.
There was give and take, yes.
Yeah. So, as I ramble, but we also talked briefly about cheese piracy, which I think is part of cheese travel, and I'm so intrigued by cheese piracy.
Well, this goes into what we were talking about of cheeses that travel, and like I said, we think of cheese must be refrigerated. It must be refrigerated. Cheese was part of colonialism in a big way. Going through the 16th, 17th centuries, the major cheese that England was producing for export was Cheshire cheese. It was the major cheese that they made. And you have cases of French pirates were actually seizing ships that were laden with big rounds of Cheshire cheese that were going to be going to the Americas and to the Caribbean. So cheese piracy was very much a thing because it's a valuable trade commodity. So you grab it. And at that same time, you have from Europe, that's when you have Edam, Gouda, things like that. That's when those came into being too. And they would also, of course, be in the trade channels. But you had the Atlantic. There were cheeses going all over the place there. New England, which is still known, we think Vermont cheese, New York cheese, fantastic cheeses.
Absolutely.
In the colonial period, the slaves in America that existed up there were typically women, and they were in dairying operations. And it was those cheeses that were made in New England, those are what went down to Barbados and the Caribbean. And you know what came back on those vessels to New England? Rum that was being produced by slaves. Yeah. So you had slaves on either end of the channel there with cheese going down there to feed them, rum going back, and then of course rum from there being distributed throughout the world. But cheese was actually part of the early American slave trade in that regard.
Wow, I don't think I was ever aware of that detail, and it's an important detail, right?
Well, we're not taught this in school. I mean, of course, I was raised in California, so I didn't get an intimate, background on, the history of Vermont and things like that. No. But no, we weren't taught about that stuff. I mean, we're pretty much taught, slaves were in the South, pretty much, and that was it. But no, slavery was all across the colonies.
Right, anywhere that the colonial powers were going, they brought enslaved people with them.
Exactly. And then slaves had to be fed on wherever they were to keep them alive, to make them do the labor.
Now, this is a really big tangent, but if you are interested in the food culture and how people from Africa and the African diaspora, enslaved peoples influenced food, there's a wonderful series on Netflix about that food culture called High on the Hog, and
hearing good things about that.
It's so good. So far they haven't talked about cheese, but everything else has been just really remarkable, wonderful discussion.
I would also recommend the book The Cooking Gene. Is fantastic. And let me get I think my poster may be blocking my view of the book. But yeah, it's called The Cooking Gene, and it is an incredible book about the history of food for Black people in America, and the importance of food and how they influenced what we think of as Southern cooking and all that. And as all of my people came through the South, and it's a very enlightening, sobering read, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, my people, my ancestors definitely were involved in colonialism and all of the darkness and terribleness that went along with it. So I don't know, I always feel like it's important for me to read more and understand more about that history. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think it's important to bring this stuff up, because we talk about the glories of cheese and how awesome it is.
Yes.
There's a dark side too. There always is. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I run into this with tea, and
oh well, yeah, tea and colonialism. Talk about a big old mess there. I mean, you have wars involved with that.
So much death and blood and awfulness with tea. And still to this day, by the way.
It is, yeah, there's still a lot of abuse within tea and chocolate, sadly.
And
as well.
chocolate,
Yes.
yeah. So I cannot think of actually any foods, goods, any sort of actually product that you can't dig a little bit deeper and find some darkness there. Wherever trade has gone, so has gone bloodshed and oppression. So sort of sadly hand in hand. So I don't know if that's just part of the human condition and it was inevitable, or it just happened to be the way our world has developed. That's a conversation for authors writing speculative fiction.
It is, because, well, I think that definitely has science fiction applications.
Yes.
Because wherever we go, I mean, you got to eat, right?
You have to eat.
And someone's always going to be in power and someone's always not going to be in power.
Yes. And food is a wonderful way of a means of control as well. So
whether it is controlling a people or a subject of abusing your own bodies. Absolutely.
Yeah. No. But
are we're emerging from the darkness?
Yes, we're emerging from the darkness. I always love to have these more toothsome conversations. They're a bit like blue cheese. They're very, bracing. They're strong. You do not necessarily want a lot of them all the time, but I still think they're important. However, I am definitely here for the joy of cheese as well. And we did talk about discussing some cheese and tea pairings, which we haven't gotten to do. Yes. And if we're going to talk about the dark side of tea, we should talk about the joy of tea and cheese.
Yes.
So,
because at some point we do wish to do an actual live panel where we get to do this.
Yes.
And serve people and get the whole thing. Yeah.
It's going to happen. And our secret cheese society is going to happen too.
Yeah, we need to get that going. Yeah.
We have many plans.
Oh, good. Dee is all about doing this cheese and tea thing. So maybe.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. I would drive
CoKoCon next year. Yeah.
I would drive up just for the day to do that. So, Beth, currently I'm having a very robust black tea that's infused with plum and a little bit of brandy. It's called Existential Dread. It's
nice.
It is my favorite tea of the pandemic. I'm sorry, Existential Despair.
Appropriate name.
By Tea Punk Teas. And it's got such a rich flavor that it could at turns overpower a very mild cheese.
Yes.
But also if I put something too strong with it, I lose the quality of the tea.
Yes. You would not want to do Roquefort with that one.
No, I would not. And I also wouldn't want to do Fontina with this or Havarti. That
you would end up with creaminess, and that's all.
That's it. I might as well put cream in my tea, which is
a thing.
It is a thing.
Yes.
And you can actually go to the boba tea places and get what's called a cheese tea, and they are basically putting in like a sort of a creamier, soft cheese in the top. It's like having very rich cream in your tea. It's delightful. But I think I would pair this with Dubliner, which, is strong enough to keep up. It has that delightful salty quality, but it will not overpower. They sort of will exist in harmony.
Yes. I would think, you would want a good aged cheddar. I would say a bandage wrapped cheddar, either English or an American one. Something that is assertive unto itself. There's a Wisconsin company called Sartori, and they have the Bella Vitano line.
Oh yes, I've seen that. Yeah, I've had some of that. It's so
they
good.
have quite a variety. They have some that are like coffee tea, but they have a whole variety that are alcohol. soaked. They have a Tennessee whiskey. They have a rum runner. They have a red wine one, a Merlot one that is, Costco will actually carry that one at times, and it is amazing. And those are beautifully refreshing. I've yet to have a bad Bella Platano cheese, and I think that they would work very well, because I'm getting, your tea would be very strongly herbal and bold, but also have a almost like a underlying bitter fruitiness to it with the plum, I would think.
Yes.
So I think almost like a good wine cheddar combination would probably go very well with that, because it would probably bring out the plum a little bit more.
Absolutely. And if you do it right with this tea, you will feel like you're drinking port. So
well, and you probably know, like a traditional Christmas pairing in England is to get your it's very traditional to get a Stilton and to have port along with it. Yeah. And again, that goes back to colonialism, because that's the ships would take the wool down to Portugal, and then they would come back with the port on board, and that became a Christmas thing of all things. So that it still is.
And port, of course, for those who are maybe not familiar, port is a sort of, it's an extra strong wine, so it will last a bit longer. Why can't I remember? It's fortified.
Yes,
I'll get there with the synonyms. So part of port, again, this is a transport sort of drink, because it will last a little longer than your.
It can last ages if you keep it in a nice dark spot in your house. And like a good tawny port, we typically keep that around, because my husband loves apple pie, and a good tawny port with apple pie is exquisite.
That's so. Oh my goodness! If you're not hungry at this end of this panel, we are not doing it well. Because now I'm like, port and some cheese would be really good right now. So Beth, what is your sort of daily drinker tea, or a favorite tea that you like to indulge in regularly?
I love Yorkshire tea.
Oh, Yorkshire Gold.
Especially, yeah, and the Yorkshire Gold is my favorite. I prefer that over the red, and I love that. That's a good one for me. That's a favorite. When I'm doing a caffeinated tea, that's what I'll do. My typical like evening relaxing tea, very basic celestial seasonings.
All right, the tea cult itself. So we'll talk about that another time. But I think that herbal teas, tisanes, are actually harder to pair, because there's more going on with the flavors. With tea, you have sort of like a baseline expectation, but with herbal teas, you've got all of these sort of floral, grassy, herbaceous notes coming together.
Those you want to do more with fresh cheeses or with goat cheeses.
Ooh.
Yeah, think of those, because you can often get more of those floral notes. You think like there's the saying, what grows together goes together. And like in France, you have Loire Valley wines. You would pair those with Loire Valley goat cheeses, because that is very much a goat region.
Yes.
Think about in England, even though the teas don't originate in the area, Yorkshire tea or even something like PG Tips have that along with the traditional fruit cake, which in Yorkshire you would serve with Wensleydale cheese. That's a traditional Christmas way of doing it.
I'm actually just thinking about how good a cup of Yorkshire Gold would go with this little cranberry infused Wensleydale.
Oh, absolutely. It would be beautiful with that.
Just perfection, which is Wensleydale with cranberries is my kryptonite cheese.
I love Wensleydale. I've told you before, when I did my trip of a lifetime to England and Scotland, I arranged the entire trip around being able to do a one-day trip to the Wensleydale Creamery, where they have the sampling room of glory. If you go online and search for the Wensleydale Creamery and look it up in Hawes, you will see the sampling table in its glory days, where 20 kinds of Wensleydale, and not all are Wensleydale, most of them are Wensleydale, but they're all done by the creamery. Just this huge table, and you get your little blocks. It's just heaven.
The Grand Arbiter and I are still plotting our trip to Europe that was, thwarted by the pandemic. And
I was supposed to go to France. And I now never may get to go. But.
Well, Beth, I mean, this is off topic, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you get to go to France because you need to eat French cheese.
Well, most of them we can't
France.
get here. Yeah.
Right. There's just, I had this experience in Italy, just there are not that everyone brings up the nasty cheese with the maggots. Yes. No one.
Yeah. And I get tagged with that whenever it goes viral again. Yeah. And I know it's out of Corsica. Yeah. It's very famous.
Yeah. But there are other cheeses that are so good and they're not pasteurized. So that's a different thing.
On that topic, I do have questions that I was given, and we have
we have left. Yes, we bring the questions.
And the first question was actually a detailed one about pasteurization. So you actually provided the perfect lead-in.
Oh, fantastic.
And I typed up an answer to that question in particular because I wanted to try and quote the science correctly on it. So Ryan asked, does it really matter safety-wise if cheese is pasteurized? For my answer for this, I went to, oh gosh, now it's buried in my stack of cheese books here. See, I have cheese books. This wonderful, if you want to take cheese seriously, this is a book that a lot of people like studying for the ACS exam actually will reference, called Mastering Cheese. And it's a read, but I pulled the answer from that book. And if you go on my Goodreads profile, I have a cheese tag on there and you can see all the cheese books I've read and my reviews. So just look up Beth Cato on Goodreads and you can find all these cheese books. So on this subject, right now, the United States, all cheeses that are not aged over 60 days and above must be made from pasteurized milk. Milk that isn't heated within these parameters is considered raw. That doesn't mean that nothing has been done to it though. It might have gone through thermization, which means it has had a brief low heat of 131 degrees for between 2 and 16 seconds. Which lowers bacteria count without killing all inherent flavor. This is what's done to most raw milk cheeses in the US. We're trained to think that bacteria in food is inherently bad, but that's not true. Foods like cheese need bacteria, certain bacteria for flavor. There is a huge flavor difference if you go between raw farmstead cheese and a standard grocery store block. But there is still the safety issue. The big thing is that eating raw milk cheeses is not the same as drinking raw milk. That is like bold underline. That's the big thing to keep in mind. The cheese making process purposefully introduces acids, salts, bacteria, and mold, all of which aid preservation. Because like we were talking about the historical issues, you would have a wheel of Cheshire cheese in the 16th century that could make it from London all the way down to Barbados and on a regular basis. So that's what good preservation does.
And that was not a trip of a few days. That was
no. That was
many weeks,
and probably packed in like sawdust or something like that. I mean, you're not talking. It wasn't in a fridge. Pasteurization is really like a false safety net. That high heat, it's kind of like chemotherapy. It kills all bacteria. It does not discriminate. So it kills all the good and bad and the unique flavor, and it cannot make up for the use of lousy milk or poor sanitation practices. Listeria is the big baddie of bad bacteria, and it can largely be eliminated by basic sanitary measures. So it's not even about pasteurization, it's sanitation, because you can make a cheese and it can be contaminated at any later stage.
Right.
Most Listeria cases between 1998 and 2008 were in ready-to-eat meat, and the few that were cheese-related were from queso fresco type cheeses that were produced in illegal factories. So it came down to sanitation, not pasteurization. So that's something to keep in mind. But the US still has this really stupid 60-day arbitrary law. And you're not even supposed to say, if you're coming back from England or France and bringing cheese back, you're not even supposed to bring back unpasteurized cheeses, which is, I think, is ridiculous. But
yeah. I did have a French professor smuggle in a suitcase full of cheese from France, and we had quite the party. It was delightful, all unpasteurized, but very, very black market at that point.
Well, and I was going to discuss traveling with cheese, because I think it is important to note that you can bring back a suitcase of cheese, as it were. You do need to declare cheese in customs forms, of course. If you're coming internationally, you have to be honest about that. I can attest from personal experience, cheese will alert at TSA, because some of the preservation methods and all that can ding like it could be a bomb. So they may need to search your luggage and assert that, yes, this is just cheese. It's not a bomb.
Yeah.
But if you're traveling with cheese, do not go with young cheeses. Just like we're talking about with the cheeses, like a Old Cheshire or a cheddar traveling, months from London to Barbados, you want older cheeses. The drier, the better. A Parmesan would be fantastic. It could go days, weeks without refrigeration. But yeah, personally, I would look for a cheese that is aged 2 years or more if you're going to try and travel with it without ice packs. When I travel, I know I'm going to be cheese shopping. I bring freezer bags so I can stuff the cheese in there. So if it does start, oozing a little bit, it's not going to get into clothes or the suitcase or anything like that. And definitely cheese shop ahead of time, scout out what airports have. I know as of when I went to the UK in 2019 in Heathrow, there was a cheese vendor right there in the airport. And they were willing to, and they were very aware of the 60-day and the pasteurization requirements for going to the US, but that still had many options available for me to bring back. And they supplied free ice packs.
Oh,
yes.
delightful.
So yeah, so that was even better because I'd already gotten a couple of cheeses from Sainsbury's and from Whole Foods in London. And I was like, oh good, now I have ice packs for all my cheese.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. Well, and you can get your, single malt duty-free whiskey that way too.
And yeah, there are lots of shops there and gobs of chocolate things and all that. But yeah, I was definitely there for the cheese, and it was a still place, and it was definitely a high-end place. They were selling caviar and all that stuff too, which I cared nothing about. I sought them out for the cheese. The
cheese. Who cares about caviar? I want my Parmigiano personally. Yes. So, well, do you have any other questions?
I do, but I'm afraid we don't have time.
Oh my gosh, we always run out of time on this topic.
We do, yes. Well, one of my questions was, what is your pick for the best grilled cheese? Ooh. And I actually wrote Dubliner along with another good melter like Havarti or Jarlsberg, and then do like a nice fig spread like Davina or a good strawberry preserve. Ooh. And do that together. And I was going to recommend doing the waffle iron for that too. Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah, that sounds really good. I like a Gruyere grilled cheese. Yeah. But, I love Gruyere and Comte. Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. But I love those Alpine cheeses.
That's so good. But now I need to try yours with the little smear of strawberry. Sounds good. Or plum. I have some good plum jam.
Yeah, and definitely a very good brand like Bon Lemon, or any of those. Yeah, so good.
I guess I know what's for dinner. So,
well, apparently from the chat, we're making everyone very hungry, and we are now out of time.
We are, but thank you, Beth. Thank you, Dee. So good to be here. This is wonderful.
And if anyone wants to ping me with cheese questions, I'm on Facebook. You can add me. I'm on Twitter. Just reach out. I mean, just ask in public. I'm always happy to talk cheese. I mean, that's a good distraction.
And then come to our book club this month, and I'll take cheese questions during book club.
Okay.
We can talk about cheese and books. That's totally fine.
Well, there's a lot of baked goods involved in my stories and that as well. So baked goods also.
Yes. I think you both have promoted yourselves on Discord, right? In the Promote Yourself channel.
I did earlier.
So.
I did earlier.
Yeah, so you guys can find their details in the Promote Yourself panel, text channel in the CoKoCon server.
And please check out the auction items because that goes live like tomorrow, right?
Should be.
For the auction. I have a whole bunch of signed books that I donated for that, including Red Dust Dancing Horses. That's the book club selection. But I have a bunch of novels in there too, and they're all signed. And please, it benefits Joshua Tree, and they could really use the support like so many.
They're an awesome bunch. We
love them. Yeah.
So yeah, please register for the auction in the next day because you don't want to miss out on that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, good plugs, Beth. Your books are fantastic. Everyone, if you have not read Beth's books, treat yourselves with a grilled cheese and a book by Beth Cato. It's a perfect pairing. It's even better than cheese and tea. So
I don't even know if I'd agree with that. Gosh.
I mean, I also have tea. So I have tea and Beth's books and cheese, which is Absolutely heaven.
All right, everybody, I'm shutting her down.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
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 Bye.